Radix Motion comes from the very basic idea that there's so much knowledge coming from how we move. And until very recently, that data was very hard to get, very expensive. But with current advancements, both in VR sensors and in AI pose detections, we can start looking at that data. And that data can be really, really important for any type of mental health or physical health intervention. Also, in the psychedelic therapy, can we get things like an understanding even before somebody does psychedelic therapy, whether or not this might be a helpful intervention for them, or what dose could be useful for them, by putting them in potentially this VR experience that we have that gives people a little bit of an idea what psychedelics do, and we can see how their body reacts. Are they getting overwhelmed? Are they like super chill? This type of data, I think, is really a type of gold mine that sort of has been overlooked by the scientific community, and there's some disconnect between a lot of the science to a lot of this embodiment. And I'm really hoping that Radix Motion can be a little bridge between the science and our bodies.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Psychedelic Conversations podcast. I have with me Sarah today, and she has the most interesting work I've been following for a while, and I'm really excited that she joined us today. Thank you, Sarah. So lovely to have you.
Yeah, hi. Excited to be here.
So just to give you a bit of a context to our listeners, I would like to read a few sentences of your bio. But of course, we'll add your full bio in the show notes, and also a very interesting bio that I cannot wait to dig in and hopefully, talk about some of your interesting work. So Sarah is a Chief Technology Innovation Officer, Red Light Holland, and CEO, Radix, is that correct? Radix Motion. She is utilizing her research in cognitive neuroscience focused on psychedelics, embodiment, and immersive technology to connect humans to their body, each other, and the environment. Isn't that the most beautiful thing? I love this work. And you also published your first paper on predictive coding on psychedelics back in 2017. Then you tried VR for the first time after a visit to Burning Man, and pivoted your research, opening the first VR lab in the motor control department at Radboud University. Wow, I don't know where to start. There's so much more, but let's begin with what is VR for our listeners?
Virtual reality, right? These are headsets that the newer technology also comes with sensors that you can hold on your hands, or even the camera that can identify your full hands and fingers. And the combination of combining both the visual sensation plus the proprioception, which is the sensation of where your body is in space. So when you move your head in VR, the environment changes the same way it would change in reality. And by combining at least those two senses, and of course, if you bring in more senses like spatial audio and your hands and vibrations, this technology can activate higher brain areas and allow the developer to decide how much surprise the person inside the VR is experiencing. And surprise is basically the coin that increases neuroplasticity in the brain. It's sort of like the dollars or the gold that passes from one brain area to the next. So if everything is the way you're used to, the brain doesn't learn much, right? But when we get surprised, then the brain needs to update itself. And with virtual reality, I can increase a brain surprise and increase neuroplasticity.
Wow, how fascinating. Right. Okay. So just for our listeners, as always, we like to sort of find out how did you find yourself in this work, especially in the psychedelic space? If you are okay and
Yeah, of course.
Talk to us. Yeah.
So I was studying in the Netherlands, where I am right now in Amsterdam. I was studying at Radboud, that's in Nijmegen. And in the Netherlands, it's a very unique situation where actually natural, what's called truffles, or the scientific word of it is sclerotia, the part of the mushroom that grows underground, are legal. You can buy them in stores. This is also what Red Light Holland actually sells in the Netherlands. So I had really a unique opportunity to try this out along with my studies. And the first time I tried it, it was so impactful that I just needed to understand, how is this working? What is going on here? So I really focused a large part of my studies around this and published a paper with this mathematical model based on the Entropic brain paper that was already out there. And it's sort of building within this predictive coding framework, a mathematical model of what happens to the system-wide brain while you take natural or classical psychedelics.
That's so fascinating. And could you please also speak to what does it mean, the entropic brain? What does that look like?
Right. So we have 86 billion neurons in our brain, right? With trillions and trillions of connections. This is by far the most complex structure, right, in the universe, probably, that we know of. And entropy means the amount of possible states. This is and your brain, with all these connections and all these neurons, can be in many, many possible states. But people that have, for instance, depression or other mental health issues, sometimes the way to model this is to say that the entropic state of their brain is too low. They are stuck in a state that they can't get out of. So the possible states their brain can be in is lower. Now, what psychedelics do, classical psychedelics, they activate the specific receptor on the serotonin neuron, the 5-HT2A receptor, and they make that neuron more likely to fire. And when we look at where that neuron is sitting inside of the neuronal structure, we see that it's sitting on the feedback loops, on the parts of the brain that are representing our prior knowledge. So by breaking that down, by making that more sensitive, instead of all these neurons sort of firing together in the way that they're used to, now there's more individuality in these priors. So parts of your brain don't need to all come together like they're used to, and instead can, shoot these neurotransmitters at different times and sort of have more individual aspects of the system, which means the system can be in more possible states, therefore a higher entropic level. And this is a little bit complicated, so I always like to give, our brain is very visual for most people. We have a very strong visual cortex, and that's why metaphors and stories can really work great. So I like to give a metaphor every time I speak about this. If you imagine that what your brain is doing is building sandcastles, with all the information that's coming from your senses, your eyes, your nose, your ears, your touch, all of that is like sand. Lots and lots of sand is constantly coming into your brain. And there's parts of your brain that are actually like buckets that have all the previous knowledge that you've learned from a very young age, maybe even from the womb. And these buckets, this previous knowledge that you have, is constantly trying to build sandcastles with the incoming sand. Now, in this model, psychedelic breaks down the buckets. So instead of having, these usual buckets and this usual reality, you now have different shaped buckets that can really create a new perception of reality for people. And if some people's buckets have been formed because they were helpful for them, at some time in their life, but it might have been out of a trauma situation or an adaptive trait that you've learned that isn't useful for you anymore, right? A lot of us, when we were kids, we didn't even have feet that we could use, right? We learned to cry and get attention and get fed in whatever methods that we could. But now as adults, we can actually have a lot more different possibilities. So it can be very helpful for many people, I believe, at least for me, it has been very helpful to break down, these buckets that came from my childhood and really examine them. Because psychedelics allow you to do that. You can like, oh, wait, this is the pattern that I usually have. And this is a different pattern that I could have if I wanted to start working on that. So it has been very, very useful for me and helping me, again, connect more to my body and the close people around me, as well as to nature. Yeah.
That's so wonderful. Isn't that profound? It's just insane how we can just talk about this now in a scientific model. I'm hearing that maybe entropic brain is also promotes psychological flexibility. Can we say that? Where people are open, more expansive, more spacious in the otherwise maybe rigid and more structured and maybe sort of, operating from that way. And now they kind of enter into more kind of flexibility where there is an opportunity to be different, to feel different, to connect differently. Can we say all of these to be true?
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty accurate, right? It means the brain has the possibility to be in more possible states. Now, I think what is really important to understand, we keep saying this in the psychedelic ecosystem, set and setting, but from these possible states, which state will you actually end up in? That really depends on the setting you're doing this in. There's nothing inherent about taking psychedelics that will make people better people, more ethical people, more loving people. That's will only happen if you're doing this in places that you feel safe, in loving places, in caring places that can then bias your system to learn these new pathways, right? So that's very important to notice, and very important for people that are going on these explorations to really find places and people that can be safe and loving with them.
That is very, very powerful to know. And I know that in the new emerging psychedelic renaissance, a lot of people are really, strongly advocating the setting and the environment and then integration and all of these. I'm guessing the key factors in receiving some of the benefits that the people desire. So how does the recreational use fall into this spectrum? Like how then what would they walk away with? And what would you say to that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think having a healthy recreational life, right, is really important for mental health. Whether it is dance, movement, nature, friends, these are all key components in mental health. And these are key components that are lacking when mental health goes down, right? This is our need for connection. And I really love a book by Julie Holland, who talks a lot about this. She's a psychiatrist with a lot of knowledge and collected a lot of data around this. These are the most important things for our mental health, to feel these connections. And it's sort of a very Western medical way of thinking that you either do this in a setting that is with a therapist, or you do this with close friends. It doesn't really matter from my perspective. Like, it really depends, what knowledge your friends have, what they are capable of giving you. Of course, this matters, the relationships that you can have with them. But personally, I've done all my psychedelic explorations either with friends who had previous knowledge and were able to guide me, and then when I felt confident, with myself, in nature or at festivals, and found them very beneficial because it's again this dichotomy between like the therapeutic model or actually life. It doesn't really need to be there. You can take things either from a therapy session into life, or create your own support structures in life to use these recreationally in a way that still gives you, I think, a lot. Or even for myself personally, I've never done this under a therapist, so I don't know what it's like to do this with somebody really supervising you. But for me, it's been very helpful. Yeah.
I think with the information that you're sharing, for example, if people can be more educated on this part of, considering the entropic brain, while in the process of psychedelic consumption, you then open up, there's, all kinds of things are happening, opportunities and expansion, spaciousness. So in that space, not necessarily always therapeutic, but you could actually be well informed and educated that if you take this with an intention that having it around, together with your friends, maybe you can have a lot more stronger connections and authentic, sort of like relationship building exercise in a way, but intentionally in a way.
Yeah, exactly. This is very much what I'm trying to do in my work, right? Is give people the type of knowledge that I have gained through research and make it a bit more fun, a bit more accessible. Before they start psychedelics, we have a VR experience called Wisdom VR, where a little magic truffle can teach you about the molecule and about how to use this safely and make the most out of its use. And I believe it's possible, like the same way that we're talking now, there's, some depth levels that might require more education, but the basic understanding of how to increase your plasticity, how it's dependent on the environment you're in, plus, a few little tips like if you want to get sort of a stronger tip, lower the lights, stop moving, because that will actually increase the freedom that your brain has from the environment, and your brain can then just sort of do whatever it wants. And the opposite, if you're having maybe a difficult moment or it's too much, start moving, brighten the lights, turn on some music, bring in some more different information into your brain, eat some sugar, so there's really ways that you learn how to navigate these trips that help you increase the chances of getting where you want to get.
Yes. I love this. This is really, really powerful. And so this is kind of like the general basic level, and this is what you love doing, and this is what you want to bring to people. And there is in your bio, which I really loved, you published a paper, I think, about something similar, and Douglas Rushkoff, he commented about.
Yeah, that was a VR experience. That wasn't a paper.
Yeah.
We one of our first virtual reality products was called Miu. It's a dance messenger. So you can send body movements, you can blow 3D kisses to each other and play these asynchronous little physical game. And yeah, Douglas Rushkoff really gave me a really nice review that I was continuing the work of Terence McKenna. It was really nice to get that acknowledgement, because a lot of the research that went into that was really research from psychedelics. What can we take from the world of psychedelics around merging and connecting to each other and feeling part of something larger than ourselves? How can we recreate some of that with technology?
Is this your area of passion currently?
I would say yes. We're now sort of going into hardware. Okay, so this is Wisdom. It's a biofeedback device that connects to your finger. And do a little live demo. And it comes with a card game that's called Mind Play. And this card game is specifically designed to actually increase your connection both to your body, to each other, and to the environment. And it's based on exercises from mindfulness, from internal family systems, from nonviolent communications. And we're really trying to, it was designed with a Red Light Holland's therapist, Jeff Hamburg, too. And we're trying to make all these things that you could be doing in therapy or meditating by yourself, and we're trying to make them a bit more fun and social, because it can be quite hard to build these patterns by yourself. I'm really, really excited. We're hopefully soon going to be on the market. We're testing it out in conferences right now. And if you want, I can do a card with you if you want.
Yeah, go for it. And I was going to say, how do you use it?
Great. So it comes with an instruction manual, and you can sort of decide, how you want to play it yourself. But the most basic idea is you choose a card, And if you're playing it by yourself, you just play the card. And if you're playing it with others, you can decide if you're going to do the card or someone else. And whoever does the card connects the heart rate sensor to their finger. And wisdom will change colors. You see now it's pretty blue. That means I'm pretty calm. And then when it gets more pink, that means I'm getting, my heart rate is going up. So a lot of the exercises are based on that. Like, can I keep my heart rate down? Can I notice the changes? And for instance, here's one of the questions. Think about someone in your close community that you admire. What do you admire about them? Be specific. Can you get yourself excited about what you admire about them? Right? So for instance, let's see, who do I like admire in my close community right now? I just came back from Israel, and I'm gonna say, you know, after many years of not being there, and I reconnected a bit with my mom after a few years, and there's a lot of things you can see. I'm getting more like excited and pink because it's also maybe a bit nervous to share this online. But it's a type of a very interesting way to communicate that's very vulnerable in some ways. You can see my heart rate out there. And I think the one thing I would like to learn from her more is her ability to help take care of people. I was there and I saw, you know, how patient she can be with people that are need help around her. And that's something that I admire and could learn more from. So.
Oh, that's so wonderful. I could just watch the colors going
yeah.
from one to another. Yeah.
Yeah. And some of them are to try to help you stay calm. And some of them are to help you get excited, and really to just try to create more meaningful connections. I keep saying, if you've ever played like Cards Against Humanity, so this is the absolute like opposite. We're trying to build the opposite world of Cards Against Humanity, where you actually are, you know, cards for humanity type thing.
Yeah, I love the neurofeedback. I think it's probably a really good way of repatterning or kind of retraining your inner states, because like bringing more attention, focus, and then just seeing how the colors are changing, you could already start thinking about, oh, okay, it's going up, and I'm getting nervous. All of that is, I think it's such a great way to bring more awareness to the person.
And trying again to make it you know, the visual aspects of it. Our visual brain is again very, very powerful. It's like our GPU computer. So being able to engage in that feedback directly through the visual pathways, and making it again social. Like you can see I'm getting nervous, and it just brings out a lot of really beautiful interactions in groups when I've seen people play it together. And sometimes when somebody's talking about something, and, you know, sometimes we have a few of them and people are connected, all the heart rates will go up together and come down together. So it can really create this larger synergy between humans.
And transparency, like
exactly
seeing your friend or the person you're playing with, seeing them going up in their heart rate or feeling nervous. I think it's such a nice way to also bring in the empathy or the compassion for them. It's so wonderful.
This is what we're working now, and it's very much inspired. We have a little booklet here that explains, you know, how it is inspired by Wisdom is a smart home device ecosystem inspired by the mycelium network, right, which connects trees and nature. Like, what if we had technology that instead of just pressing likes like we do today, technology that actually transferred important information, embodied information about us, and we utilize that to improve our communications. So I see that as something very psychedelic in nature that we're trying to bring to technology.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's also very much needed in the West, because, you know, a lot of the Western cultures, you know, they have different needs, you know, especially I like the rainbow sort of colored different aspects of bringing the psychedelics to, you know, in different uses and different ways of looking at it and modalities. So I was just going to ask, what brought you to the neuroscience, and how did you get so interested about the brain and all of the stuff that you're doing now?
Yeah, to be honest, that started very early. I have a background of training in martial arts and specifically karate, and I was like the most clumsy child. Like literally training in martial arts has probably saved my life multiple times in many different aspects. I owe a lot to my amazing teacher growing up. And I was always fascinated by, the differences. Why is this person able to learn faster and I'm so slow at some things? And why am I in some ways, faster at other things? And just like trying to see under the hood, not only to understand, but also to hack it. At the end of the day, I consider myself a hacker. And if I want to improve learning capabilities and improve capabilities, like how can I figure that out, especially on this body brain connection? Like I always say, I'm an embodied cognition, motor chauvinists, some of us call ourselves. We believe we have a brain only because we move. That is the main reason living creatures have brains, in order to interact with our body and in the environment. So I knew I wanted to do that from, quite early on. But I went to study physics from my first degree because the head of the cognitive neuroscience department said that's the most important thing. Have like a strong math and physics background. That's the type of people we need. And honestly, I suffered so much from that it took me quite a while to go back to university and almost remember that was my initial passion.
Wow, so great. And also with especially, in the psychedelic renaissance, how do you converse with people who come from a very different and sort of like psychedelic use in sort of, like the traditional way, the indigenous way, or there's, we see and meet and speak to a lot of people who advocate psychedelics as like, don't go there. They shouldn't. They have no business in science or technology or things like that. How do you respond? Like, and they're also really angry with the biotech companies coming in and creating all these different things and modalities. What are your thoughts on that?
I think first of all, I understand, right? I can definitely understand what it's like when something that is sacred to you is then opened up to the world in ways that maybe you're not okay with. Some of probably the criticism towards biotech companies I probably share. I think, and this is what I really like, or why I joined Red Light Holland, is because I do feel aligned to them. We're not trying to patent nature in any way. We're just trying to create support structures around their use for the modern world, right? And I think it's absolutely great that some people want to explore things in the more traditional way that psychedelics have been used. And I think some people like myself have a much more science-oriented way of thinking, and wouldn't necessarily feel, especially I come from a very, I grew up very religious, and I sort of managed to like clear my brain from some of these things that for me were not beneficial. And I'm a little bit like, let's say, lacking of trust almost in authority figures of any religion or any culture. And this is where, the sort of community reliance in my community and my friends comes into play, and trying to offer them support structures to use this substance in a way that they can benefit from. So I would hope that, indigenous healers can see the benefit in that, and the fact that the modern world has a lot to learn from, again, connecting to nature, connecting to each other and our bodies, right? These are things that we have lost. Many of us in the modern world, that indigenous cultures, I'm sure, or I have high belief that they had and a much higher capability. So I would hope that these worlds can merge in some ways that would also be beneficial for them, right? And a lot of what, my advocacy work that I do in Oregon or Washington is to try to ensure as much as I can that as these worlds open up for legal facilitations, there is a room for Indigenous practitioners that have been doing this. And we've really been, writing reports and doing market research to try to tell governments that this should be allowed. And honestly, it's not always, the governments are not always listening, unfortunately. Like we know in Oregon, Indigenous facilitators are still going to need to go through a very expensive course. And in order to actually do the same thing that they potentially have been doing, before. But we're trying, at least. That's what I can say.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, great points. Talk to us a little bit more about your work through the Red Light Holland. What is it, and what kind of information are you gathering? And if you could talk to us a bit more. And how
so Red Light Holland is first of all, it's a publicly traded company in Canada. And they have a psychedelic truffle or sclerotia farm in the Netherlands. Obviously, everything we do is absolutely legal. So there's no sort of underground sales anywhere else in the world. But we are looking to where places are opening up legally. We've seen Oregon at the beginning of next year is going to open up. And Colorado has now just legalized. So we're really looking into how we can bring the knowledge that we have from the Netherlands, where we have been operating, again, with a therapist that has a lot of experience around either group events. Microdosing is a very big focus for the company. And we have a microdosing app. If anybody wants to check it out, imicroapp.com. It's a privacy-first app. We don't even connect your email or anything like that because we understand these are very sensitive issues for some people. And some people, you can choose to share the data for research. So some people do that, and we can use that research and then take it to governments and say, hey, this is the people that are microdosing, and say that it's helping them. These are the best practices that we've used in group events, and we conducted a survey after group events to sort of show the best practices, the doses, the amount of facilitators, all these things that in the Netherlands, because it's legal, we can sort of be ahead of the game, right? And take that knowledge and talk to governments. We also did a very big market research in Oregon to see what people want, how much they can pay for these services. It's really important if we're trying to make this accessible for people to understand what they can actually pay for this, and how many of them want to microdose. That was a very big push because the original measure didn't really mention things about different doses. And luckily, I'm really grateful for the Oregon government. They're really listening. And there were a lot of people, not only us, but really a lot of people and groups that were advocating for some type of framework that would allow for lower doses to still be accessible. Because if you need to just take a microdose and be with a facilitator for 5 hours, right, that's just not going to be practical in any way. You microdose a few times a week usually. So thankfully the current drafts, and we don't know exactly yet what the final rules are, but they are listening to this advice and to the data out there and trying to make this more accessible.
Wow. Yeah. So much is going on behind the closed doors. So what are your observations in this current wave now, and maybe challenges that you see and you are passionate about talking? Because I know your LinkedIn profile is so great because you're always, hands-on and always conversing and sharing your thoughts. And it's really beautiful to see. Honestly, I think we need more of you guys out there, like courageous and really kind of immersed in this wave. I really appreciate that. I just want to say that here.
Yeah. So I think the first optimistic point is really the Colorado win. That I think was huge. It's an even more liberal measure, which will allow people to grow for themselves and gift it. As long as you're not sort of economically benefiting it, it's very community oriented, which I think is amazing, again, especially for also Indigenous cultures. And so that's a very important point there that's happened. And I think, if it was only Oregon, then I had these like almost fears that it would stay only within Oregon and wouldn't continue to grow. But once we have Colorado, now I have a lot more confidence that we're going to see Washington, California, and other states legalize in a way that is, yes, more oriented to what I'm interested in. Because personally, and I know that there's some people that will only take psychedelics if a doctor prescribes it to them, and that's absolutely fine, right? These people can benefit from psychedelics too, I believe. If doctors are well trained and there's facilitators within the medical system that are well trained to provide a safe environment, I believe that can be benefit many people. But many people like myself, I don't want to get some label from the medical community that says something's wrong with me. I don't want that type of gatekeeper on my mind and my consciousness. I want to be able to have access to these substances myself. And I think there's a lot of people out there like me. So I'm really excited to see, that the governments are starting to listen and the people are managing to sort of get together and make these changes in the governments. So I'm hoping for that. I'm hoping pharmaceutical companies won't try to block this too much, right? I'm hoping they understand that they can have a economical model with people that do have health insurance and want to go down the medical route. I'm hoping they can be okay with that without trying to block other people. I would love to see a bit more honesty in these medical companies because, a lot of the times we go to these events and people talk all about like how important it is that doctors prescribe and this and that. And then there's the after parties and we see what happens in the after parties and people are not really being honest about how psychedelics have benefited them. Because almost everybody who has benefited right now from psychedelics has not done this from a medical model or a clinical trial, right? We've all sort of found our way to this by ourselves.
That's the most authentic truth I've heard someone say. It's so true. Do you know, there was a conversation I listened from Rick Doblin. I think he was talking to another host and he said, he goes, I hope that he was saying that I hope I will see in my lifetime people coming out of their psychedelic closet.
Yeah.
And this is what you speak to.
Yeah, that's why we have our Free the Magic shirts, right? We're very much hoping that people that this becomes more of a topic that you can talk about and de-bias a lot of the negative biases that are still out there. And understand this is a powerful substance. This is a powerful substance. And I think the other point I'm hoping to see is open to criticism. And unfortunately, in some sort of spaces in the psychedelic ecosystem, there's really almost closed-mindedness for criticism. Everything needs to be perfect. And the things that aren't perfect are just literally, some researchers have been shoved out of a conference lately, and that is really not the ecosystem I want to see, not what I'm working for, because criticism is how we get better, right? Being open to feedback when things are not working, hearing from indigenous cultures, understanding people that might have been hurt from clinical trials or from underground therapists. This is really, really important to make space for these feedbacks and accept them and learn from them. Otherwise, this is really, could be dystopian. So that's really, I think, a big challenge for all of us always to be open to feedback that we might not want to hear. But I would hope that people who have experience with psychedelics understand how important that feedback is. Otherwise, you're just in your own little bubble of narcissism.
Yeah. So amazing that you speak to this. Especially, and do you also see that some people, let's say in just general public, there is a bias, in some communities and sort of like, people who have actually received so much benefit from psychedelic substances, they like you said, it's just like, this is it, this is it. The only way is psychedelic medicine is going to save the world. That's it. We found the cure for everything.
Yeah, I think that's very dangerous. The hype is there for sure. And there's, I think Robert Cartide Harris also talks about this a lot, and the latest conferences I've been to, like, what happens to somebody who then tries this and it doesn't work, like the advertised magical thing. It could be very, very disastrous, right? And I think it's really important to understand that psychedelics, like we explained at the beginning, they open new pathways, they give new possibilities, but that can require a lot of work to then get from this like new plastic state to where you want to be in. It can open a lot of previous trauma, things that especially if people have a lot of trauma that they've been, shoving underneath. It could be like a Pandora's box. You open it, it's all there. You need a lot of support. You might need, various different things and tools in order to deal with all these new things that come up. And it's a whole process. It's not about sort of the end goal, really. This is also a very sort of Eastern way of thinking, more about the way. It's finding a path that doesn't necessarily have a like end goal of this is where I want to get to, and nirvana or all these things. It's more about like continuous learning, continuously trying to figure out these connectivity pathways. And definitely like we need to be careful with the hype. This will not do good for the industry or for people to come in with the hype. It has, I really love the sentence, like high possibilities, low expectations.
Yeah.
Right. So come in with who knows, and there are, again, open possibilities, but we really need to maintain our expectations with this substance.
That is so amazing. And lately some of the conversations that I'd like to see and encourage is about just having an open mind to however people want to explore it, depending on their needs. It's not about one type for everyone, and no need to get aggressive or angry about how people want to go about using and creating opportunities different ways, like your device. I mean, some people might love that. Some people say, oh my God, this is not good. Why are they doing this? We're moving away from the point of what these are. So there are lots of conversation. Isn't it a wild time? This is all happening all at once. It's just like everyone speaks differently about them. They all have their own ideas, what they should be like and how they should be used.
Yeah, I think it's a for me a very wild time, because when I was studying and I published my paper, I sort of pivoted more to virtual reality because I didn't think I could have a career in psychedelics. I thought, except for the Netherlands, this would never be accessible in my lifetime, maybe. I couldn't even imagine the situation that we are in right now, where in a few months we're going to be legal in Oregon, and then, next year in Colorado, and like more and more spaces that are opening for this. So I think that's very, very wild. And yeah, and I think, unfortunately, the we know best, right? I think that's what you're pointing out. There's a lot of groups that say we know best. It's a little bit human. It's a little bit human, and it's hard to sometimes stay humble. I will say, even about myself, right? I've spent many years of my life researching this substance, both on myself and in my communities, and in paper and code and math. So even for myself, it's sometimes hard to stay humble and say, well, this is likely to work better. But I definitely try to keep an open mind and to understand that, again, these paths towards connection, which I think there is a widespread agreement on that, both in indigenous cultures and therapy and data. I think I would hope that we can all agree that that is what provides for our well-being, is this connectivity. And I think there could be many, many different paths to get to that connectivity.
Yeah, it's going to be super interesting to just watch this whole thing unfold for sure. Yeah, in the next sort of few years. So, Sarah, as we come to end of our conversation, I'd like to also hear you speak about your project, Radix Motion, and your, all the things that you're working on currently, and what would you like to share with us?
Yeah, so Radix Motion comes from the very basic idea that there's so much knowledge coming from how we move. Our pose, our speed, our symmetries. And until very recently, that data was very hard to get, very expensive. But with current advancements, both in VR sensors and in AI pose detections, we can start looking at that data. And that data can be really, really important for any type of mental health or physical health intervention. And that's what Radix is really hoping to promote. And what Radix IP is all about is looking at these high-level extractions from our movement data and seeing how that can be used for drug development, right? If we're trying to give somebody a drug, isn't it almost obvious that we should be looking at what it does to their bodies and not just giving them, some questionnaires? Also, in the psychedelic therapy, can we get things like sort of an understanding even before somebody does psychedelic therapy, whether or not this might be a helpful intervention for them, or what dose could be useful for them, by putting them in potentially these are sort of the ideas, right, with this VR experience that we have that gives people a little bit of an idea what psychedelics do, and we can see how their body reacts. Are they getting overwhelmed? Are they like super chill? So this type of data, I think, is really a type of gold mine that sort of has been overlooked by the scientific community, potentially because not a lot of scientists really are embodied people. You don't see a lot, unfortunately. Hopefully it's growing, but you don't see a lot of scientists that are dancers and martial artists. And there's some disconnect between a lot of the science to a lot of this embodiment. And I'm really hoping that Radix Motion can be a little bridge between the science and our bodies.
That is amazing. I love that. You reminded me of Edo Portal. Founded the movement culture. I think he also
I trained with his group a bit in Israel. Yeah,
did
actually,
you? Okay.
Way back. My brother was a big disciple, and I just came to a few of their trainings. Yeah.
Yeah, he also advocates that, like you said, we evolved in consciousness because we move, and you said it earlier, something similar. Have brains because we move.
Yeah. Absolutely. I totally agree with that, and we see this very much also in old age. The moment people suddenly start moving, their hip breaks, it's very, very fast deterioration for the whole system. And this is why I really love immersive technology, where you can move inside of these VR worlds and dance and connect. And we're building a bigger version of wisdom that's like double the size, with a cell phone charger that will remind people to put their cell phone down, and a Bluetooth speaker with surround audio, so you can put your phone down, put music on, and connect to your body. Because really, these screens, as much as they do give us some benefits, right? I can connect to you right now. They also take away from a lot of our bodies just going like this all day.
Yeah. Wow, that's exciting. So all things relevant to what you are passionate of, just kind of bringing more mindfulness into people's lives in all different ways of technology and resources.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's wonderful. Just want to say one thing, because I'm trained in somatic therapy, and somatic therapy is also just like you said.
It's the only therapy I would ever recommend. It's the only therapy I did. And when people ask me about therapy, I'm like, talk will not get you into where the pain actually is. It's in our bodies.
So that's wonderful. And I feel like you are tapping into that with coming in with the neuroscience now. Like, you definitely building bridges here. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. So this is it for now, and I'm excited to have you back in the future. Hopefully we could follow your projects and see how all of these, unfold in your world, and follow your journey, if that's okay.
Yeah, thank you.
What would you like to say as last words of wisdom to our listeners?
It's funny, I also have a podcast, and I always say also last words of wisdom. Feel free to reach out. I'm always open to talk about these things, and I have a lot of resources that I always love sharing. So
that's fantastic. So we're going to add all of that into the show notes and your bio and links and everything for our listeners if they would like to, read more, learn more, and connect with you. Yeah, great. Thanks, Sarah, for creating this time with us.
Bye.
Thank you so much, everybody. It's a pleasure again to be with you guys, and thank you for listening and tuning in and for all your support. It's been an incredible journey, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you again on the next one. Bye for now. Thank you so much for joining us. Psychedelic Conversations podcast is designed to educate, inform, and expand awareness. For more information, please head over to psychedelicconversations.com. You can also share with your friends or leave a review so that we can reach more people. You can also join us in our private Facebook group to keep the conversation going. This show is for information purposes only, and it is not intended to provide mental health or medical advice. Thanks for listening.